In the more pastoralist communities, there isn't a historical culture of education, and there's a lot of advocacy work that needs to be done with chiefs, with community elders, to explain the advantages of education, whilst at the same time being sensitive to the cultures and the demands of the culture. You know, that as soon as they're of a certain age, a young age, boys will be out guarding the cattle, girls will be preparing the camps. And that's what they do. There's quite highly defined gender roles and expectations that that's what they will do. It's challenging to sell the idea of an education that it doesn't involve cattle. Many communities are now warming to the idea, but it's still a challenge in some areas. It's a new country with no infrastructure, many isolated areas, many distinct tribes with distinct cultures, all of which need particular advocacy messages and cultural sensitivity when trying to encourage the formal or informal education that we're supporting. One of the huge challenges, which I didn't touch on so much, is around gender issues, which is linked to culture as well, and traditional gender roles in South Sudan. The enrolment of girls is incredibly low, and the dropout of those girls who do enroll is incredibly high, particularly during teenage years. There's a pervasive culture of early marriage in many parts of the country still, and girls are unfortunately seen as an economic asset by parents. The dowry attached to a girl when she gets married is huge. It can be as much as 120 cows, which is, you know, if you translate that into dollars, it's a huge amount of dollars. We're talking tens of thousands. You could understand why a family could see a female child as an economic asset that way. For that reason, they want to protect their asset. There's concern that if they go to school, they will get spoilt, for which they may be potentially abused, or they will fall in with boys, or get abducted on the way to or from school. So many parents in rural areas in particular are unhappy with their daughters attending school. So a big part of our programming, through all our programming, is trying to instill gender awareness, gender sensitivity, and advocacy for girls to come to school. In our alternative programs, we're seeing a huge amount of female attendance, about 41%, which is fantastic. And much of that is because where girls have got married young, from their family perspective, they've achieved their kind of economic purpose, so they're a lot freer. Depending on their husband, then they're very often free to come back into education. So the accelerated classes have a high level of female attendance, which is great, but it doesn't address the issue to gender imbalance. So some of the things we're looking at to do there is working with matrons in communities, so senior females in communities who will support girls both emotionally and physically, particularly as they're going through hormonal changes in their teenage years, to encourage retention in the schools. The provision of hygiene packages as well for these girls is also going to be a boon to retention. And community mobilisation is a big part of our work. We work with groups of children and young people we call social advocacy teams and support them to do the community mobilisation themselves. So they've got some brilliant ideas. They've done plays, role plays, radio shows, performances in communities to encourage other learners, particularly female learners, to come and get education, to see the advantages of education. And sometimes you end up talking language you don't really want to speak, where you almost collude with the idea of girls as an economic asset by making the argument that with an education, the girl becomes more valuable in terms of being worth more for the wedding dowry, which again is an argument which doesn't support female rights or children's rights, but given the context in parts of the country, is the first step to try and encourage girls into education. Another big thing which we've seen internationally, female teachers encourage girl-child enrolment and retention, as do educated mothers. So we're hoping that this will be a transformation within the country as more and more mothers get educated, as more and more women become teachers. We'll start to see a lot more enrolment and retention of female learners in schools.